Hey there everybody and welcome back to another Blender tutorial. In the last one we left off making these tiny ripples, which, they look good, but we also need to make puddles and bigger ripples. So where we are going to get to today is something that looks more like this. We have puddles, and not only do we have small ripples, but we have these bigger ripples that only exist inside the puddles. So yes, we have this map, but also we have this map, and we combine them and make puddles and all that. So if this sounds interesting to you, keep watching, and it does build off of part one, so that's exciting. Let's begin. Okay, so where we left off, we had all these nodes. First thing I want to do is I want to take all of them, so we send all of this into a bump node, and I want to hit Control G, so this is our kind of rain map. And what I want to do with this is, since I want to have a pass of small particles and bigger particles, so big raindrops and tiny raindrops, what I want to do is I want to go into this network. Remember that the scale is saying how many coordinate systems we have. That effectively says, the size of the raindrop. I want to expose this as a parameter, so I'm just connecting it here. Not disconnecting it, but connecting this here. Either way, we now have control over this. So we can have big ones, or we can have little ones, just like life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this map, I'm going to duplicate it with Shift D and make one that's 10 times bigger. So these are our bigger puddles. And if I take them and I add them together, I think technically you want to take the maximum if you want to be fancy. But you combine them, whether it be addition or this, we get their like dual map, both of them combined. And I think if we run this through a height, this is going to give us normal information, which, if we let this process, will look a bit better. I think the only thing I'm seeing is in the big puddles, they kind of disappear almost immediately. So let's just make a tiny modification. I'm hitting this too, so this is a separate node group, so the changes we make in here won't transfer. Simple thing is, remember, we use this fraction to randomize our progress in the raindrop thing, which turns into this. I want to soften that a little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this through a color ramp. So I'm just going to have this decay over time. So we have this. I'm thinking we just take this second slider, we push it over, and we make one here with black. So it has a bit of a fade. When it goes to white, it fades a little. And the idea is, if we take everything we've done and we multiply by this, it should fade a little more nicely. So let's see. Yeah, I think that fades much more nicely. So before, kind of abrupt, and then after, nice fade. So let's see what this looks like. This should seem a little less abrupt. Well, it's not perfect, but it definitely fades a bit better. Let's look at this thing. Yeah, and it might also be that we're looking at this through the Eevee look dev viewport. Yeah, it does fade a lot more nicely when we're in rendered view. Okay, so we have little puddles. Little drops. We have big drops, and now we need to make puddles. And we only want this big drop map to exist where there are puddles. This might seem hard, but it's actually the easiest part. You take a noise texture, you run it through a color ramp. That color ramp is going to be high contrast, so we have very defined black and white regions. These don't really look like puddles, do they? So let's increase the detail and increase the roughness, and now they kind of look like puddles. So if we make some of this area, so when we're looking at this, when we look at this and we say that this is metallic and low roughness, that's what makes it look like water. What I'm saying is, if we take these puddles and say make the white areas, look like puddles, and the black areas not. What I'm saying is, you can take this, you can connect it to the metallic. Long story short, we can also invert this, because wherever the metalness is high, we want the roughness to be low. So this should invert the map. So before, after, it's not inverting shit. Let's invert the color. So before, after. And this is connected to roughness. What this should do is give us a puddle map. We'll see in a second. There we go. And this is all controlled via the noise texture and the color ramp. So we have puddles. Again, where this area is super white, we're connecting it to the metallic, so it's going to be very metallic, and that's where we want the roughness to be low, and vice versa, which is why I did what I did. Why do you do it? That's why. If we wanted to be a bit fancier, we could add one in the middle and have a bit of a fall off. So I want there to be kind of an immediate fall off and then a bit of a fade. So maybe something like this. So this is without, and this is with. It just kind of adds a bit of wetness to the boundaries, something like that. And what I want to do is I want to say, hey, this node group, the big drops, only show up in certain areas. So what I can do is I can take this, send it through a multiply, and say exist only where we multiply with this, which will make it so that you see some of these are kind of cut off and showing the edge of the puddle. So let's see what this looks like once it loads. So what you're going to see is the big puddles only show up where there is, the big ripples only show up where there's puddles, and we could do a bit nicer of a thing, but the small droplets kind of show up everywhere. And I think one thing I want to do is even like the areas that aren't puddles should be a little bit wet, a little bit reflective. So what I'm going to do is for those areas, I want to subtract the roughness just a little by like 0.2 or something like that. So as we subtract more and more, you're going to see it's going to be more and more reflective. So even these areas are a bit shiny, but I'm going to do it by like 0.3 or something like that. Now I think a lot of the issue that I'm seeing here is that we are looking at LookDev. So I'm going to go into cycles, GPU, and actually enable a HDRI so we can see what this looks like. Now normally when it rains it's overcast, but for the purpose of the reflections and everything, I want to see all these clouds. I'm just going to pick one with a lot of clouds so you can actually see what's going on here. And let's make this film transparent. Yeah, you can see even the ground that's over here is a bit reflective. And if we were to set this to 1, it'd be super reflective. And maybe what we can do here is we can do the same for addition. Doesn't make much sense. So before, after. As we increase this, everything's going to kind of turn into this. Okay. What does this look like? It looks pretty good. The main thing I want to illustrate, though, is if we put an addition before this noise texture, this is our slider to basically say where are there puddles and where are there not. So when this is set to a certain value, we're going to have rain everywhere. Otherwise, in certain areas, you get the idea. We're not getting too complicated here. We could do a part 3. Basically, all I would say is I'd like make this subject to a Fresnel node. So maybe I'll just illustrate that here. If we use a Fresnel, it will actually give us the angle that we're viewing at. And I can make this a bit higher contrast so you can see. I want this to get black a bit faster. So you can see we get white here, black here. And what we could do is we could say, oh, make the puddles reflective depending on this. So like for example, this is how real puddles work. Like when you look above, you don't actually see the puddle. Maybe what you could do is you could multiply the roughness or subtract. You could do something. You could do something with the roughness. Okay, let's make this simple. We're gonna have another principled BSDF. We're gonna mix it. So when it's 1, it's pure this. When it's the other, it's pure this. Actually, let's make this other one not metallic and not that reflective. So we have our 2 shaders, and we can connect our Fresnel either like this or the other. Let's see. So here we see puddles a lot, and then as we go up, the puddles should be less visible, question mark. So let's see. It should be... No, I think I inverted them. There we go. So you don't see puddles here. And then as we go here, 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 you're going to see the puddles a lot more. So technically that is something you could do, but it makes it kind of hard to tell what's going on. Maybe you can bring this up a little. This makes it pretty harsh. So no puddles, puddles. Just the thing you could do. I think I'm going to end it here. You could get a lot more complicated, but since this person made a whole node graph and I'm sure they're selling it, they can be responsible for this. I just wanted to show generally how you would make something like this. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to put the final blend file that I made available on Patreon. Again, it's just this. It's kind of rough, but I think it works. So I want to say thank you to all the active patrons. You can get this on Patreon, link in the description. And thank you everybody for watching part 2.